Okay, 11 o'clock here in Arizona, and we're going to get started with the 2019 September 26th edition of the In the Know webinar. What we do on this webinar is we try to give you as much of the new shiny objects that we're throwing out there and keep QuickBooks Online as we can. Sometimes we can't do it like when we want to, but anyway, so let's get started. I'm Wesley Booth. It's been a while since I've been here, so I'm glad to be back. I've been here at Intuit for a little over 5 years. I'm on the national accounts team. We work with the big firms. Some of you may recognize my name or voice, so welcome for those that I talk to on a regular basis. I do actually take customer care calls every day. That's what they pay me for. So me and most of the other people are not professional presenters, so we may trip over a word or two, forgive us. So I enjoy training. That's kind of how I got this started in this whole webinar thing with the In the Know. So let's jump in today. We got short looking agenda, but it's going to take us an hour and a half. Mileage, huge feature that people have been looking forward to. So batch creation of checks. We're going to deal with some of the time-sensitive usage limits things that are going on in advance. And we're going to give you a preview of the new QuickBooks Desktop 2020. So let's just jump into the program here. Questions and feedback. So please, 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 you can see there on the slide, the little question box where you can ask a question. We will not be responding to most questions in there, so don't give us grief if we don't respond to your question, because we have one person monitoring that with hundreds and hundreds, with 800 people on the line and asking questions. There's no way one person can respond individually to your questions. So ask them. We will get to them if we have to follow up later. And the feedback we need for the presenters is always really valuable. So please go ahead. Questions, comments, whatever feedback is always helpful. Let me explain the CPE process for this webinar. We got two segments. We got the online segment, which is what this main focus of the webinar series is. But once a year, when the new version of QuickBooks Desktop rolls out, we like to throw that in there because there's a lot of you that do have desktop clients, so we want to tease you with some of that information. So what we're going to do is those that hang out and answer 3 poll questions and hang out until 50 minutes of the hour, you'll be able to get your 1 CPE credit. Those that hang out past the 75-minute mark will be able to get 1.5 CPE credits, and if you answer the 5 of the 6 poll questions. So that's how that works. So I will let you know before we jump into the desktop, how much time you need to hang out if we're a little bit early. I'm planning on being a little bit ahead of schedule because we still have a lot to cover. So hopefully that explains the options there. Learning objectives today: understand how QuickBooks Online mileage tracking works, how to record mileage transactions in QuickBooks Online, the new feature of batch transactions in QuickBooks Online Advanced, and how to identify the recent changes to the advanced ecosystem. And then we're going to get into a plethora of QuickBooks Desktop features. So let's get started. Okay, so this here is, I'm going to kind of introduce the handout. And there's the link for the handout today. So sometimes the link in the handouts, the control panel doesn't always work. So you can go ahead and screenshot that, type that down, grab the handout. You don't need it during the presentation, but it'll be a handy reference afterwards. This slide here particularly I want to take a moment on, because for those of you that have billing issues that seem to are wholesale clients coming in and out, sometimes there's some really weird failure in the process of managing that client firm connection. And the notes on this slide are going to give you some really, really helpful tidbits to help solve that, because if you call into us, we'll do what we can, but most of those, this is what we need to do to fix those issues, are on this slide in that handout. So you want to if you have any online clients, you'll want to make sure you get the handout, there's the link, and look at this slide, because what we're finding a lot of the wholesale billing issues on client connections and that kind of thing is because of lack of names, billing information, and addresses. So if we don't have a full U.S. Postal Service validated address on that client, any of these things can break or not work correctly. So I want to take a moment on that up front. Also, we do have a resource. So our programs are not perfect, probably no surprise to you. And we do have a page that lets you know, you can sign up for alerts, if payroll's down for maintenance or even the regular maintenance, those outages, those maintenance schedules, those types of things. If we have a surprise where we're not online when we should, that's also covered in this slide. So that there, again, you'll want to get that handout so you can maybe subscribe to that if your business is mostly online. That'll be real handy to let you know when stuff is not going to be available because of planned outages or unplanned outages will be noted on that. Okay, so this webinar, the In the Know webinar, we do record all the webinars and then we post the recording. It takes a while to do the editing and all that process. So typically in about a week, we will get the results of this webinar, the video, the questions we don't get to, we try to get those posted as well on the webinar page. So this slide is in the handout with the link. So you can either type in that link that's there on the screen, or you could just get the handout and follow that link. So that's where the recording, the questions we don't get to, all that good stuff are. And I think we also have the handout there too, but if you have the handout, then you have that link as well. Okay, so there again, now this handout link on your control panel there, it doesn't work on all browsers, so we're aware of that. That's why we give you that link often, so you can at least grab it that way. So, and I see that we do have some audio issues, so I'll hold this slide for a moment. So I want to encourage everybody to get that handout. And those that can't hear me, but I want to let them know that we are live, we're ready to go. So unlike most of the webinars we have with Intuit, this one requires the computer audio, not a dial-in phone number. So hopefully everybody's got that. Okay, so we're gonna jump into our first topic today. It's been a highly requested topic. And one of the most requested features in QuickBooks Online is mileage tracking. We had it in self-employed. We had a lot of feedback. Now it's in QuickBooks Online. So we have a few things we need to share with you regarding that. And to present today, we have Nathan Castellan. He's a service and support specialist right here in Tucson. Like I mentioned, we got mostly a Tucson contingent today. He's on the self-employed team, and he's actually the guy that keeps us all up to date with a few things. He likes to get out there and educate us as well as a small business. He's been with Intuit for a couple of years now. Thanks for presenting today, Nathan.
Hey, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm really excited about presenting today. One of the biggest requests we have for mileage or for features is definitely mileage in QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to quickly go over some of the bigger points on it, go through some of the finer details, and then we'll finish up. So the biggest thing, obviously, with why mileage in QBO and why we were bringing it over is just so businesses now can track those mileages, whether for the accountant side or for the clients, and really be able to take advantage of those deductions, which, as you probably all know, is some of the biggest deductions you can get normally in years, just those mileage deductions. Another exciting part about it is it gives not only yourself, but of course your clients more options. So you're no longer forced to have multiple accounts, like to have a QuickBooks Online, a QuickBooks Self-Employed. Now they have the option to either do Self-Employed or they can go over to QuickBooks Online without having to keep a separate account and be able to still retain that mileage tracking feature. And of course, one of the main reasons we brought it over is this: it was highly, highly requested. I'm sure a lot of you have been asking for it for a really long time. We are listening, and we made the jump to finally bring it over into QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to go over some of the finer details of what is mileage in QuickBooks Online. So one thing to really make a point of is master admins right now are the only ones that have access to this feature. Now, I want to make that point here that we are working on basically looking into moving that over so other people can access it as well. But right now our focus is making sure it works for the master admins before we release it to everybody else. So to be able to see the actual feature, you need to be the master admin of either the accountant account or of the client account. Now, master admins with this feature will be able to keep clear records of the business trips for tax time, along with running tally of the potential deductions. So they'll be able to see that, and I'll show a screenshot of that here in a moment. You'll see a spot where they'll have basically the running tally of the deductions. Now, like I mentioned before, only master admins will have access to the mileage tab within QuickBooks Online web browser at this time. So if you're not seeing it for whatever reason, or sometimes you'll be able to see the tab and you go to it and it'll say you can't see this for whatever reason. The reason why is because you need to be master admin. Now, at the same time, master admins will also be able to access mileage tracking within mobile as part of scheduled releases. So what that means is it's not out to everybody yet, but we do plan to have it on all digital platforms very, very soon. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second as well. And with that release, as it comes over mobile, we are including the automatic tracking. So that'll be a really cool feature for anyone in QuickBooks Online, as you'll be able to go into the app, turn on the automatic tracking, and of course, end of day or whenever you want to review those, you'll be able to go back and be able to mark those mileage either as personal or business. So that'll be a really cool feature for everybody involved. Now, like I mentioned, trips will be able to be categorized as either business or personal. So we're working on adding some things to that as well, because we know normally within QuickBooks Online, personal is kind of a weird thing to track. So we are looking at feedback for that. So if you guys have any feedback for that as well, definitely pass it our way. Now, right now, the amount of vehicles are still limited to just one, just like in QuickBooks Self-Employed. Now, that is definitely one of the first things we're hoping to change very soon, is we want to expand that to more than one vehicle. But right now, as we're just trying to get to work within QuickBooks Online, we're limiting to just one vehicle for the time being. Now, currently our release is 100% of web users should see this. So as long as you're master admin, you should be able to see this on web. 50% of iOS or Apple users will be able to see this, and about 5% of Android users will be able to see this. Like I mentioned, this is something we are slowly releasing out as we work out the kinks and make sure it's working for everybody. So hopefully these are aiming to be 100% by the end of the month. Now, we've had to push it back a couple times before, so there's no promise on that, but that is what we're aiming to do. Now, plan changes to the future, like I mentioned before, is allow tracking for more than one vehicle. That is definitely one of the most highly requested features, even within QuickBooks Self-Employed, for any kind of changes to the mileage tracking feature. So that is something we're very focused on, and that is one of the first things we want to work on changing. And of course, that will hopefully open it up to multiple things, like being able to allow other users to access it and things like that. So moving on here to the next slide, I'm going to talk about where is mileage. So you can see here, this is a screenshot of what it looks like normally for the accountants, of course. And at the very bottom left, you can see there it has a spot that's labeled mileage. And so it's right between taxes and accounting. Now, when you go to that tab, it's going to look like this. So looking at that real quickly, you can see that at the very top, you can see there's the mileage deduction. So that's the running tally I was talking about before. So as you add in mileage, either manually or automatically, that's where the mileage is going to add up the tally of it, as long as it's labeled as business. Of course, it'll ignore anything that's personal. And you can see in the very top right, it has of course, the actual amount for per mile. And that's something that is, of course, right now it's set in stone. We base that off of what the IRS gives us. And of course, one of the things we are looking at, and this is probably a lot farther out, is being able to edit that at some point. And then, of course, the main features that you guys are concerned about is the very top right underneath the help area. You can see there's a button there that says add trip. So that'll allow you to add in any trips manually. Now, one kind of tip for that as well is that allows you to do in like bulk mileage, basically. So if you have a lot of mileage you need to track for like last year, or even to get caught up with this year as we're releasing the feature out to everybody, that's where you can add in basically your historical mileage for the year. So you don't have to do individual trips, you can add it in as one bulk amount. Now, there is a little bit of a drop down button there next to the add trip as well. That's where you can get to the edit vehicle. So if you need to make any kind of edits to the vehicle information, whether it be mileage, type, or you bought a new vehicle, whatever the case might be, that's where you're going to find that information as well. So moving down into the main section there, you can see there that we have the ability to see the date and the location. Now, just a quick heads up too on that is if you add any manual mileage, you don't have to add in the actual addresses. You just add in the total mileage. So that's usually a really easy way to tell whether it's manual or automatic is if there's no location there listed, more than likely that was something that was put in manually. And then you'll be able to, of course, affect the date, put in the distance, and the type, of course, will be business. And one of the other things you can change there, is you can see it kind of there on that page as well, is the trip purpose. Now, right now, just like in QuickBooks Self-Employed, we still require that a purpose is put in, but that is, again, something else we've gotten feedback on, and we're looking at changing that later on as well. And you can see the last thing I want to point out here is at the very top above the date and location, we have a spot that says type all and date all. So that's, again, if any of you are familiar with self-employed, that's a way where you can kind of filter in through the trips itself and look at the types of trips or the dates of trips. And of course, you can search for trips as well. So the last page I want to show you is just kind of what it looks like for the client as well. It's very, very, very similar. It's going to be basically the same spot for the clients. It's going to be between taxes and accounting. And I forgot to mention, there's one thing to mention with that too, is that this is accessible to everybody in QuickBooks Online. So whether they have Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, or Advanced, they have access to this feature. Now, the other thing to point out here, of course, you can see there, it has the total miles driven, 431, and that's going to be based off of anything that's labeled in there as personal or business. And then you can see now at the very top, there's that mileage deduction showing $52. So that's showing me just the mileage deduction based off the ones I have labeled as business. Now, another thing to point out there, of course, I mentioned before that you guys can give us feedback. There is a share feedback button there. So if you do have access to the feature for whatever reason, you want to give us any pointers or mention any issues, you can definitely use that button. We do see it all on our side. We review those pretty much daily. So that is all I really had for questions, or I'm sorry, that's all I really had for mileage for today. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to questions and feedback. I'm going to pass it back over to Wes.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. We do have some good questions. One thing I want to do there is, first of all, I got a comment on the master admin role here, but please, please, please give us your questions. Be thoughtful, you know, because we're trying to this is a rollout in process, so we're trying to enhance the product. So give us your request. Hey, I like this feature. This feature is not so good. This limitation's not so good. Give us suggestions how it might work better for you in the real world, because that's who we're building it for. We're building it for you, for your clients. So I have a comment that I'd like to make before we actually engage Nathan in the Q&A. The master admin, notice right now we're kind of limited to the master admin viewing in the QBO. We're working on that. We'll see what happens in the future on that. But you guys are accountants, and I've been pushing the last couple years because we've removed the requirement for the accountant to be the master admin on QBO clients for wholesale billing. If you're not aware of that, we've done that. It was a couple of years ago, we removed that option. So personally, after the thousands of conversations I have had with you, I work with accountants, you know, you guys every day. I can understand why you do want to be the master admin, but I still encourage that the owner be the master admin. For a number of reasons. I won't get into that here, but I wanted to at least directly address the master admin feature on that. So with that said, well, what can accountants see and not see there, Nathan?
So going back to the master admin portion, if they are the master admin for whatever reason, they'll be able to see everything the client does as well. Or in their case, if they're the master admin, obviously the client's not going to be able to see the mileage features. So it's still that difficulty there where it only is accessible to whoever the master admin might be. So you might have to switch it up depending on who needs to be able to use that mileage tracking and be able to record those mileage. Now, the accountant, if they are the master admin, like I mentioned, they'll be able to see everything. If they're not, the only thing they'll really be able to see is within the reports themselves. So we are still working on the reporting side of it. So I don't have a ton of details for you on that, but I do know that right now it's supposed to show up in the profit and loss. as basically a type of like expense. And that's something that I know we're working on because we've already given feedback on our side as well, saying, no, it's not really supposed to be expense. It's more of a, as you guys know, a deductible at the end of the year. And so they're working on creating some tax reports so you can report on that more accurately. So right now it's generally ignored in reports unless you add it in as a filter.
Okay, great. So I want to go ahead and solicit your feedback, because the audience here, you accountants, you deal with a number of your clients and various features. So give us the feedback of how you would, let's say, if you were building this, how would you build it? You may not get your wish, but at least we need the feedback, because with 1,000 people on the line, we're going to have probably 300 or 400 different wish lists. So let's get to another question here. Okay, so we have people in Florida, and if you're in Florida or Tucson or some other place where we have these nasty traffic tie-ups, apparently there's some segmenting of that trip. Are we aware of that? Are we working with that, Nathan?
Yep, that is actually another one of our highly requested features. Like I said before, the top one is definitely multi-vehicle. That's no question about that. But very closely behind, we have things like being able to do bulk trips, do repeated trips, combine like trips, things like that. So that is something we're definitely aware of being able to take the ability to pick a bunch of trips and basically merge them together into one. Or another example would be round trips. You go to one place and you head straight back. That's counted as 2 trips in the tracker, but you want it to be 1 trip because it was just a round trip. So those are things we are definitely aware of.
Okay, also regarding this, right now we have 1 vehicle. We're looking at adding additional vehicles. What about additional people? Because let's say if you're XYZ company, you may have 4 people using 2 different vehicles or whatever. So how do we deal with multiple vehicles? Is that something, multiple people?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good thing to bring up. I'm glad whoever asked that question there, because that's part of the poll question. What we're hoping to kind of gather from you guys is, would that be something that's beneficial to you? Is it something where you'd like to be able to track like mileage per person and so on and so forth? So we'll have that question going on in a minute. But that is something we're still kind of gathering data on. So whatever feedback you guys can give would be perfect, because that gives us more support to be able to go to our product managers and go, hey, look, this is definitely a requested feature to be able to give this access to employees or otherwise, so we can track multiple vehicles, maybe even per employee.
Okay, hey, thanks, Nathan. We're not going to get to any more questions, so we're going to deal with a poll question here in just a moment, but I want to make sure that everybody listening here, go ahead and continue to give us your questions and feedback. Nathan is going to see every single comment and question that's presented in that question box today. So we'd be here for the rest of the webinar if we went through every single question. So I just want to make sure we will get back to you in one way or another. So our next topic, the presenter is actually going to have 2 pieces to this. We're going to talk about QuickBooks Online Advanced. We've got some really good feedback, lots of feedback across the board on that. We've got a new feature that is part of QuickBooks Online Advanced. QuickBooks Online Advanced is now taking the top tier for those businesses that get more complexity in QuickBooks. Sometimes QuickBooks Plus just didn't have the features. So we've added QuickBooks Advanced, which most of you know about. And today we have batch creation of checks, and we're going to have, go ahead, Nima, you can go. We're going to have Nima Patel present that today. She's out in her Mountain View office there, her headquarters there in California. She's been with Intuit 7 years, and she loves delivering awesome. This is not her first time here, and she delivers awesome. So thanks for delivering awesome today, Nima, and welcome.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. I'm super excited to talk to you guys today about QuickBooks Online Advanced. Today in particular, I want to talk about batch checks. So this is a feature that launched this week, this Wednesday on September 25th. And what is it exactly that we're launching? we're giving accountants and their clients on Advanced the ability to create multiple checks at once. So if anyone's familiar with our process for creating batch invoices, this will work almost exactly the same. It'll help you and your client save time by expediting the check creation and editing process. Today I'll kind of walk you through how it works and also show you a live demo of the feature, which is live now. So in terms of how you access it, you can access it through the master sort of add tool in QuickBooks Online. And there's now a new batch transactions panel that is available to you. And when you click on that, you will then see the batch transactions panel where you can add both batch invoices, which launched earlier this year, and you can also add batch checks from this very same place. And so just to give you a visual of what this sort of looks like, you can see that you can add multiple checks here. Within this single interface, you can add up to 150 checks. So you can work on many checks at the same time to sort of reduce and save time on that labor intensive one at a time check creation process. And you can also create one check and then duplicate it for a number of multiple vendors if that's also something that you want to do, or assign multiple categories to a single check if that's also something you want to do. So with that, let me actually jump into a live demo. And what I'm actually showing you here is a test drive. So this is actually a test drive that is live today for QuickBooks Online Advanced. And it gives you the ability to actually explore all of the features of Advanced, not just batch checks. So this is fully up to date, and we'll have a link in the handout if you are wanting to play around with this yourself. So to access batch checks, you're going to click on the global create icon up here, and you'll see that there is a batch transactions panel labeled new. Oh no, sorry, let's log back in. So you see the test drive doesn't require a login actually. I just validate that I'm not a robot and I'm inside. So here we are again. So I'll click global create. I'll click batch transactions, which is a new panel and a new sort of link that is available to you. So this is the batch transactions panel. And so as you can see, you can kind of see where we're going with this. Batch invoices is what we launched earlier this year. Batch checks is what we launched now, but we do expect to have more batch actions coming soon, and likely leveraging this batch transactions panel as an easy way for you to add those batch transactions. So I'll click on checks here and just sort of illustrate how this works. So you can see there's already some sample data in here. I can change the check number if I want to. I can select who this is going to, specify the amount, and specify any other details about this, assign it to a project or a product if that's something I want to do. Add some notes here as well. And with that, I can just review my data. And if I want to, again, as I mentioned, create multiple categories for the same check, I can do that as well. So let's actually delete this one and I will show you how that works. So here we go. So for the same one, if I want to add another category, I can do that right here. So I can assign multiple categories to the same check. Now, if I click save, oh, looks like I need to add more data in here. Well, so it's not saving for me right now, but when it saves, typically you'll then be able to access it under your expenses. So where that check will show up will be right here. And then you can view it, you can see it in action. Just have to make sure that all of your data is properly and correctly filled out. And so again, this is in the test drive. This is available for anyone to view and test out if that's something you want to do. And then I'll just go back to my slides here. So that's the end of batch checks. As I mentioned, batch transactions are a big piece of the workflow for advanced. So would love everyone's feedback and questions on batch checks in particular, as well as any feedback you may have for additional batch actions that you feel like your advanced customers, those fast growing complex businesses would need.
Thanks, Nima. So we've already had a number of people say, hey, what about this type of transaction? What about that transaction? So if you have your wish list, this is an opportunity to get your wish list for batch transactions in there. One quick question, Nima, is this available for advanced only or will it be available for plus?
That's right. Right now, it is available for advanced only. What we've seen is the advanced customer tends to be that faster growing complex business. And one of the insights we have is those businesses tend to have a lot of just work they need to get through and in a batch capacity. They deal with a lot of invoices, a lot of checks. So we introduced this first for advanced, but let us know if this is something you also feel like you need for plus, and we'll certainly take a look at that feedback.
Yeah, so thanks, Nima. So please, if you feel that you have, let's say, 20% of your plus customers that this would be a huge advantage for, go ahead and submit that in your question log. Classes, can we do classes in that batch transaction process?
Like assigning classes to a specific check?
Correct.
I'm not sure about that. I'll need to go back to the product team and check about that, so I can get back to whoever asked that after this webinar.
Okay, so for whoever asked that, we will definitely reach out to you on that. We had a question, when this go live? It went live for all advanced users yesterday, correct, Nima?
That's right. Yep, yesterday, Wednesday.
Okay, so this will be in your, if you have customers that are in advanced is where you're going to see this. Now, will accountants see this feature or is it only in advanced?
It's only in advanced, but if you have a client that's on advanced and you can access their account, then you will, as an accountant, also see it.
Okay, one more quick question. We have a bunch of questions that we're not going to be able to get to, so I apologize up front on that, but we're kind of limited here on time. Memos. Can we do memos in this process on these checks?
Yeah, so right now you can add notes, but I'm unclear if you can do any additional memos. Again, that'll be something I'll take back to the product team to confirm.
Okay, great. There's a lot of other questions won't be able to get to here in the live Q&A, but we will get responses. If not individually back to you here in the next couple of days, they'll be we'll get them on the web, posted on the web page first chance we get.
Perfect. So I do have one more topic for today, and this one is all around the new updates to usage limits in QuickBooks Online. So let's go through what those updates are. So just for a little bit of background for those unfamiliar, earlier this year, we introduced revised usage limits for QuickBooks Online that affected classes, locations, chart of accounts, and users, particularly in Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus plans. Essentially, chart of accounts are now limited to 250 accounts across those three plans, and classes and locations, which are not offered in Simple Start and Essentials, but in Plus, are limited to 40. In Advanced, both of those limits are unlimited. One of the reasons why we made this decision is we found that there were, our top 2% of customers inside of QuickBooks Online had a disproportionate high number of these specific entities, classes, locations, and chart of accounts. And it's really with that insight and some other insights that we even built Advanced. It's for those fast growing complex businesses that are using a lot of data. And so with that, we carved out some usage limits that we believe made sense, and they affected the top 2% of users across all of QuickBooks Online in the US. So since that launched earlier this year, what's changing now? So for the first 6 months after introducing these new usage limits, customers were able to maintain any entries they had above the limits. It was sort of a period where if you were over the limits, you were okay, and it gave customers some time to either clean up their books if that's something they wanted to do, or evaluate, advance, and upgrade if that's another action they wanted to take. What's changing is now in October, QuickBooks will no longer support plans that exceed these usage limits. And so if you have any clients that are over limits, you will need to work with them to just ensure that they are within the limits as allocated by their plan. So how will this work exactly? So essentially there are 2 key dates to remember. So we have notified all accountants and customers about this. It started with some notifications which went out in early September, and the effective dates are in October. And so starting October 16th, anytime you sign into your client's account, we will direct you to either manage usage or upgrade to advanced. You will still be able to access the account, but we will let you know very clearly that, hey, your client is over limits, so you will need to take a specific action before October 28th. After October 28th, your client's accounts may start to be suspended on their next renewal date. So that is the sort of next enforcement after seeing a sort of pop-up inside of QuickBooks Online. So what exactly happens after suspension? I really encourage everyone to get within their plan's limits before October 28th, so this does not happen. Now, let's say it does happen and your client's account is suspended. You will need to speak with customer support to reactivate the account. There are many things that happen when your client's suspended. Just a few is one, you can't reduce the data anymore because you will not be able to access the product. And you won't be able to upgrade directly inside of QuickBooks Online. You will be able to get data out, so you will have read-only access to QuickBooks, and you will be able to export data. So that will happen, but you won't be able to reduce usage or upgrade directly inside the product. You will need to talk to customer support. We also know many are on special wholesale billing discounts, like our $5 packages. And so just know that those will go away if an account is suspended. And then if your client signed up for QuickBooks Online Payroll through their QuickBooks subscription, that payroll subscription will also be suspended. So highly, highly encourage everyone to take action before suspension. So just once again, to reiterate, why are we making this change? We want to make sure that clients are in the product that's right for them. So many complex businesses that are growing really quickly are still using QuickBooks Online, but the old QBO traditionally wasn't built to solve their needs, and that's why we introduced Advanced. What we found is these businesses tend to spend 3x the time in their books, they have 3 times the amount of data in their account. They typically have 10 or more employees, and so that's why we created Advanced and introduced Advanced to kind of address these needs, the needs of businesses that have more complex accounting needs that need more customization and capacity. So you as the accountant, what action could you take today? So there is a way for you to know which of your clients are exceeding the limits. And so inside of QuickBooks Online Accountant, there is a dashboard. It's the usage details dashboard, and it's accessible through the settings gear. And you can then see a full list of your clients that are exceeding the limits. And then if you click on see status, you'll then be taken to their account where you can see their particular status on any of the given limits. Great. So I'm open to questions and any feedback about this change. I want to make sure everyone fully understands. Again, highly encourage everyone to take action so that they don't reach that October 28th date with clients still exceeding limits. So if there's any clarity I can provide, please let me know.
Okay, thanks, Nima. If you could just back up one slide, it'd be helpful. Okay, so we had a number of people say, how do we see that? So if you could just maybe, do you have a slide that gets any more detail than that? Or please at least give them the path to get to this page again.
Sure. Why don't I sign into QuickBooks Online Accountant right now
Sure.
and show everyone?
Yeah, that'd be helpful. And then while you're doing that, maybe you can type and talk. Because I've taken a number of calls that where their chart of accounts and the number on the usage limits report necessarily don't match. And most of the cases on that, they've imported from desktop. Has that, you may need to sign out, sign back in because your login got tweaked. So when they import from desktop, there's XYZ number of accounts and classes. And we had not been counting those. Is that changed? Are we going to be counting those now, or how's that count goes? Because sometimes there was some confusion on that count.
That's right. I'm glad you asked the question. That has not changed. So if you have any clients that migrated from desktop to online, any of those entities that came over in that migration, any chart of accounts entities or classes and locations will not count towards the usage limits. This goes for any current migrations that have happened or any historical migrations that have happened.
So in other words, if I had 300 chart accounts, my chart of accounts, I migrated over, my usage limit is going to say 0.
That's right.
Okay, just want to make sure we get
yes,
that.
If all 300 are from the migration, that's right.
And then if I add 25 tomorrow, then what's my count going to be?
It would be 25.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I've had that phone call with the accountants before, so I want to make sure we get that really clear.
Yep.
Okay, you can go back and show them where to get to that.
Great. So everyone's looking at my QuickBooks Online accountant account. And so how do you get to the usage detail screen? So from here, you'll click the settings gear. Let's go there. And then right here, you'll see a link called usage details. So that's where you'll want to click. I won't have any data here. So unfortunately, my screenshot on my PowerPoint showed you what it would look like if data was populated. I currently don't have any clients exceeding the limits, so it looks blank, but that at least shows you how to get to this page. And then if you have any data on this page, the page will also tell you when that data was refreshed. So when was that list pulled? It'll also give you a date for that.
Okay, awesome. Could you just go back to that menu pull down and we'll just finish your presentation kind of hanging out there so they can get a good feel for that, because we can cover it, but sometimes people are trying to make notes and it kind of passes them by. So I just want to make sure they see where that is. Okay, so thanks, Nima. I know we have a lot of other questions that we'll get to after the webinar, so we're out of time for this segment. So if you have any more feedback questions regarding batch checks, mileage, and QBO, usage limits, please give us your feedback. I know not everybody's happy with usage limits, but give us your feedback. We will do what we can. There's a lot of things I don't understand about why some decisions are made. I'm not necessarily happy with every decision that Intuit makes, but I do, when I hear the other side of the story, it's like, okay, that's what it is. We'll make the most of it. So let's move on to the next topic. In fact, we will not have a poll question, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of shift gears. We're gonna jump into the desktop. So if Matthias would queue up. We have about 2 minutes and one more poll question before those that do not want to hang out for the desktop presentation. Do in QuickBooks Desktop 2020. I just want to preface before we actually get into Mattia's presentation, there will be, just after he's done in our last Q&A, we're going to have a couple of poll questions and Q&A through his segment because we're going to break it up here a little bit. There will be a slide. There's a in-depth training tomorrow we'll tell you about, and then also one in a week or so if you want more depth, more detailed information. So I just want to tease you up front on that. And for those of you that do not want to hang out for the desktop, you've filled in your 3 poll questions, you can leave. We got our 50-minute requirement for you. So to present the QuickBooks Desktop 2020 today, we have Mattias Schumann. He's right here in Tucson. I've had a chance to work with Mattias a couple of times as I've been on the beta testing team this year and also 2 years ago, and he definitely knows his stuff here. So I'm really happy to present Mattias. He's been here for 17 years, and he's always a pleasure to work with, and he's a real source of knowledge. So thanks for attending and presenting today, Mattias.
Thank you, Wesley. Happy to be here. As many of you probably know, we did launch our QuickBooks 2020 this month. So we have some really nice features, some of which have been asked for many, many years. In advanced inventory, which of course is enterprise only, we have alternate vendors, landed cost, and express pick pack. In the rest of QuickBooks and of course and enterprise, we've made some invoicing related improvements, payment reminders, adding PO number to emailed invoices, combining emails to customers. We've also improved on reporting, having the ability to collapse columns. File management, we've now made it easier to find files on your system. And we've made some tweaks to help and support. And so this is going to be really high level. Wesley had indicated, right? We have some detail meetings coming up. So we're going to kind of whiz through. It's by no means intended to teach you everything you need to know, but really to give you a flavor for, you know, what are we looking at in QuickBooks 2020. So the first feature we're going to take a look at is alternate vendors. And, you know, for the longest time, at least the 17 years I've been with the company, we've had preferred vendors. And so, you know, we've been able to say for any given item, who's the vendor that we prefer for that. What we've added at the request of many folks is the ability to have alternate vendors. And what that allows us to do is to essentially either import or show a history of the item as it was purchased or is able to be purchased from alternate vendors. And so what you'll notice, for example, on the screen here, is that we have Patent Hardware is my preferred vendor, as we saw on the other screen. But I also have an alternate vendor that I can also purchase from. And basically, how would I get this? I can get this from transactions, and I can get it from import, and I'll show you in just a second where you might import. What's interesting here is, right, you do see the last order, last quantity, but you also learn, you know, what is the lead time for a given vendor, and any additional notes that you might have. And so if we go, for example, if we wanted to import this information for a given vendor, we're able to go to vendor items, and for example, we can copy in for this particular vendor, and we would have item name, description, item cost, etc. And of course, you know, we talked about the lead time, purchase unit of measure if we want it, and the notes. And so this is kind of a copy and paste. As many of you probably know, you can also use the Excel import. So we've added that functionality for this particular feature. So in addition to, you know, lists that you could for a long time import through Excel, you can now import essentially the vendor item list, the associated costs, etc. So a really cool feature. And what does that allow you to do? So if we go to create a purchase order for an item, what you'll notice is that we now, next to the rate field, we have another little clicky button, and that shows us what we know about that item. And so we could say, hey, you know, somebody else has a preferred price that's different. So maybe we purchase on price, maybe we purchase on lead time if we had it. And that will help us determine who we're actually going to create the PO for. So kind of a really improved feature, allows us to keep track of alternate vendors. You know, we've done some follow me homes, and that's been a very much requested feature. Okay. The other exciting feature for enterprise is landed cost. Essentially, landed cost allows you to attribute the shipping and handling costs that may not be charged by a given vendor, but attributed to that inventory. So as the inventory sits in the inventory account, it is actually shown at the landed cost value, right? So you've got your base cost of the item plus any shipping and handling costs that are attributed to this. And I'll show you a really high level, again, not intended to teach. We have already set up, for example, in this file, the items, the landed cost items, to a landed cost account, which is essentially a zero balance account, if you will, or you know, a pass-through account. So you'll put your landed costs as they come into that account, and then basically take them back out as you've attributed them to the inventory. And so if we go, for example, we have a bill here. This is a bill from my vendor, and it has no shipping costs attributed. We've now added a calculate landed cost button, which allows us to attribute costs that are on other bills. So in my example here, we've got Fred's Freight Forwarding, and we're going to add a bill. What we'll see there is we've got $500 that we need to attribute, and you've got choices that we've given. So you can attribute this based on quantity. So you'll see that based on the quantities that we have, we've got the percentages calculated, and ultimately the shipping and handling cost as it would be attributed. The other options are percentage, right? It's just straight 1/3, 1/3 because I have 3 items. Amount, it's based on the quantity. And then we've got do it manually. And what we've done here is just to show, for example, it'll say, you know, what's remaining. So at least you've got a sense of, you know, what else do you need to attribute, assuming that you're attributing all of this 500, which of course you don't have to. You can also change that up here. But if we go, as an example, if we go by quantity and we say post to bill, it also asks us, do we want to update the selling price? It's reasonable that sometimes, right, the shipping costs have increased. Maybe you want to pass that along. And so your selling price might change. And so you've got options to do that. In my case here, I'm going to say I'm fine with the original selling price. And what it does is it updates our bill. And if you'll notice, we've got the amount listed, the original amount on the right-hand side, the new amount listed on the left-hand side. So we've essentially attributed those $500 in freight costs to the items based on the allocation that we wanted. And so we can save and close that. And that is landed cost. Okay, And then the third item that we added to Enterprise is Express Pick Pack. So we've had for some time now what we call internally Pick Pack Ship. So the ability to pick and then ultimately to pack it. And the issue that we had is that we had that built originally as essentially separate processes. So you send it to a picker, they pick, they send back the result of their picking expedition, and then you send it back out to pack. And the feedback we got, and it's relatively obvious, is well, lots of people do the pick and pack all at the same time. And so all we did is add a separate action and a separate tab that you'll notice here, Express Pick Pack. And so it's the send it out to the same pick person who also packs as they go along. And so you've still got the option to pick and pack separately or to Express Pick Pack. So I'm not going to go through and show you that in because it's literally, if you've got another tab, you've got something extra in the drop down. The process is ultimately very, very similar.
Okay, thanks, Matthias. So we're going to break Matthias' presentation up in a little bit smaller segments. We don't throw the fire hose at you for 30 minutes nonstop. So give a chance for everybody to come up for air. Please, please, please put your questions, feedback in there. We have a couple of good ones. We don't necessarily have a lot, and I'm kind of surprised how many people are still hanging out. Glad to have you here through the rest of the webinar. So this is desktop. Like Matthias warned you, it was going to be quick. There will be a recording in case you kind of didn't keep up with them. That'll be posted next week, so you'll be able to review just this segment. And each of these Q&A segments break out a presentation. So in the recording, you'll be able to look at just these pieces. So you don't have to digest 90 minutes if you just want that about 9-minute segment that he just covered right there. So question for you. Actually, I want you address something that wasn't brought up. So if they have a sample company file, why don't you address and that may be in a future presentation, but let's go ahead and address that right now.
Yep.
If there's any limitations on sample files.
That's an awesome question, and I'm glad you and I agreed for the reminder. Thank you. Yes. So if you recall, the screen where we actually pick the bill for the shipping and handling that we want to attribute, that whole screen is based on system time, so your computer time. If you've ever played in the sample company files, you'll know that they're actually set by default to way in the future, right? So the file, for example, for 2020 is going to be showing as dates in 2024. So if we use a sample company file, basically anything that's dated in 2024, you're not going to see anything in this real-time window. And so what you want to do if you're going to test this out and play with it, if you will, you want to make sure that your file is not a sample company file, or make sure that the information that you entered is actually today's date or current time frame. So we're not looking 2024 because it is not forward-looking. It'll look for bills that are existent current period in time.
Okay, thanks. Vendor part numbers. Is there an option on that process to load the vendor part numbers?
So hard to know what the context is there. We do have the ability in QuickBooks to have the manufacturer part number. So if we're talking about the import, the answer is no. Basically what you saw there is what we have in terms of the import.
Okay.
So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I kind of scrolled past that, so it's off my screen now, that question. So we need to keep moving. There's a lot of other questions in here I wish I could get to, some of which I think he kind of covered. But again, he's going to go through all these questions here in the next few days, and we'll get those the feedback posted on our page. So,
okay. So as I mentioned, the remaining features are not enterprise specific. So payment reminders in Pro Premier. So payment reminders, real easy to set up. In fact, what I'm going to do is walk you through this. All right, so we've got a menu item under customers and schedule payment. We've got a first time screen. You'll only see it if you haven't set up anything already. We're going to tell it to get started. Create a new schedule. Okay. It's going to ask us who we want to send this to. We don't have a mailing list set up yet, so we're going to set one up here. Okay, and once we have it set up, we're going to need to choose who we're going to attribute to this list. And so, let's see, we might do this. All right, so we'll go with those three. Okay, and then it's what kind of reminders do we want to set up? So in my example here, we're going to say we want it 30 days after the due date. Then we'd also want to do perhaps 60 days after due date, and maybe 90, and maybe 120, and maybe 150. And so what you'll notice here is that after I've set up 5 different reminders, I no longer have a plus sign. So this is limited to 5 reminders. Hopefully those reminders will be sufficient to provoke some payment. And so basically we can go ahead and save this, and it gives you a quick rundown, says we're set, right? We can go review. We're just going to, for right now, close, just so we can show again. If we go to customers and again to payment reminders, we've got the ability to manage the mailing list, so we can update and change who all's on the list. But we can also review and send payment reminders. And so right now we've got Christy and Robert are a little behind, and so they're listed by virtue of the reminder scheme that I had set. And so I can choose to send that now. I'm going to pass on that, but that's as simple as that. You can set up multiple payment reminder streams, if you will. Right. So if I go back here, I can say have a new schedule, and I can say, yep, I want to add a new list, and basically go through the same process. And you're able to swap folks between lists. If they're showing as being under one list, you can move them over. So really easy to have different schedules, different lists, depending on what you're trying to accomplish in your reminder schedule. Okay, and this one seems really kind of simple. Customer PO number and invoice, email subject. What we found is that a lot of folks have been asking, you know, I really want to, when I send out the emails, I want to let my customers know their PO number. And so we've put in the ability now to go and change that. And so, for example, if we go and send forms, and we're looking at the email to Christy. So right now we'll notice that it says invoice 1100, but it says nothing that means anything really to the customer, right? So I send them the invoice, they don't know what this relates to. And so a PO number would be a good thing to have. So we heard that ask, and if we go in and edit our invoice, we've now added a new field that we can add, customer PO number in the subject. And you'll notice up here, just added it. And we can save, click OK. And if we go to send forms, and now we'll notice it actually says the template has changed. You know, going forward, that wouldn't be an issue. But what you'll notice is this is what the email is going to show now. It's going to say invoice 1100, and it has the customer's PO number. So the customer can now go in their email and search by their PO number and find the appropriate invoice. Okay, and this is also a much asked for feature, and it makes total sense. We have, when we go to File and Send Forms, right, if we look here, we've got a bunch of emails that would be going to the same person. And it's like, well, why are we sending multiple emails when we're sending them all at the same time, right? Why should the customer have 4 separate emails? And so what we've added is the combined forms to a recipient. It's not limited to invoices. So for example, you'll notice here for Christy, right? We've got, for the family room, it is by job, but for the family room, we've got not just invoices, but it'll send all of those together. So at least by job now, we've got the ability to send combined emails. Okay, and we'll take questions on those.
Okay, thanks, Matthias. So could you back us up a little bit, verbally anyway? These last 3 features are available in all levels of QuickBooks, correct? Not just Enterprise.
Correct.
So could you just list those, the 6 items you've covered? Let us know what the first 3 are in Enterprise, and then these, so that way they get a little bit of organization in their heads of what's available in Enterprise and all QuickBooks.
Yeah, so only the first 3 are Enterprise only. So the advanced inventory pieces that we covered. So the alternate vendors, the landed cost, and the express pick pack are features of Enterprise only. The last 3 features that we just covered, which would have been the payment reminders, the customer PO number on the email subject, and the combining of multiple emails, those are across all SKUs, so they're not Enterprise specific.
Okay, great. I think that'll help clarify that, because as we're going through all these topics, it's kind of hard to keep track of all of these things. So let me see if we got anything else here. We got a lot of good comments. One person really made a good comment about landed costs. So yeah, that's why we're getting these features out too. So don't really have any other questions that are burning on my screen. So let me go ahead and we're going to jump into Matthias' last section. He's going to cover a couple of more, actually 3 more items. And these are also on all across QuickBooks, not just Enterprise, but Pro and Premier as well.
Yep. So the first one of those is horizontal collapse. This one, again, seems such a simple thing, but the feedback we're getting is really like, you know, where has this been all this time? And what we've done is we've added, like it says, a collapse feature for our columns. So as an example, right, I've got my profit and loss here, and Christy is essentially taking up the whole screen, and I might not need that, right? And so we've added a button at the top for collapse columns. And so now Christy and all others are just a single column. I can then go ahead and expand and not again. I would point out too that, you know, while the plus and the minus are obvious places to click, you kind of actually don't have to. You can just click on the name. It'll do the same thing. But as an example here right now, I can scroll through really kind of nicely here, right? And so, for example, if I wanted to go for Bristol. I just wanted to see that detail, and so that's expanded for me for Bristol. So
Okay, I'm
really,
just going to jump in there real quick, Matthias. So I don't know if you noticed it. Go back down to the scroll bar on the bottom. I didn't know if they were aware of you were scrolling through them there. So notice that scroll bar on the bottom. That's how he's scrolling through the list. So just wanted to catch that while it was on the screen, because that would be a really tough Q&A.
yes. So nice catch, right? And so, you know, you've got an all or nothing, expand or collapse at the top, and then just same thing. Look at that, I have scheduled reminders. So you can expand individually as needed. And this is basically going to work for any reports that have classes or that have jobs, right? And so I will say this, that in beta, we had several testers who said, wait, I'm not seeing this. And the reason that you wouldn't see it is that you don't have classes or jobs would be essentially a reason not to see this. But for any reports where you have classes and jobs, this will work. So much requested, particularly from accountants. We've heard overwhelming feedback. So hopefully you guys will also like it.
Matthias, let me interrupt you again here, because it's going to be easier to deal with a Q&A right now. If you go back there.
Yep.
Bear with me. So this collapsing thing, how is that going to play through on reports?
You mean printed reports?
Correct.
Yeah, it's going to show what's on the screen.
So if I collapse it, do a report print, that's what's going to see. If I expand it, print, it'll be expanded.
Correct. And so, in this example, right, if I went and said, okay, the only thing I want expanded is Christie and everything else not, when I print that out, that's what's going to be printed.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Any others while we have it open?
They're asking about, keep going. A lot of good accolades here.
Good to hear. All right. The other thing that we've heard frequently, and we actually get calls into our call center around this surprisingly often, is where customers are unable to find their file. They've saved it someplace else and have no recollection. Some of them just flat out don't know. And so what we've added is this find company file feature. Really quite simple. So to show you, I'll go ahead and close my company.
Got too many windows open there, Matthias.
No kidding. All right. So on the No Company Open screen, right, we've always had the ability to see the last some number of files, by default 4. It can be changed to up to 20, and the same normal buttons we have for creating company file, etc. What we've added this year is Find a Company File button, and what it does is it literally goes and scans for all files with the QuickBooks extension. So, in my example here, you'll see, I have company file, I have backup, many backups. Probably if I keep scrolling, I may eventually find portable company files. And yeah, right there, right, portable company files. And so it goes through and then tells you where is it. And so, I can hover over it and I can see the exact path, but I can also simply highlight it and tell it to open. And so the ability here to anything that's on my system that's a QuickBooks data file in its various forms, right? A portable company file, backup, accountant's transfer files, those would show up here. And so that should hopefully help customers, your clients, find where their files are, and hopefully, don't have a reason to call you about it or call us about it, and cause them less stress. We've also got here removable media. So if you did have attached media, thumb drives, external drives, you would be able to see those. I do not, so I can't show you that. And then we've got a network button, which is essentially the same, go find it. Unfortunately, right now, it does not go across the network and magically find. That is a point of discussion, but how to do that effectively, nobody's landed on a way yet. But at least we'll be able to find what we have locally.
Yeah, that network find, that could be a real challenge as I work with customers and as we try to find that company file. Oh, that's right. It's over on the Q drive.
Yeah, right. In a perfect world, you would be able to do that, but how do you really go and crawl, the whole network? So that has complications there. So something we're thinking about, and hopefully one day we will actually have where you can click on network and it'll go find all of the other files that you have existent elsewhere. Okay, we'll cancel out on that. All right, and so this will be the last item we talk about. And for some of you, this is going to be familiar because we cheat a little bit here. We did not announce the feature really when we launched it actually last year. And so I throw this in because some folks are not aware. So in QuickBooks, there used to be the old QuickBooks Help, which would pull up information that was essentially shipped with the QuickBooks Desktop product. So you could be offline, online, didn't matter. That's what it would pull up. What we did last year is we created this Smart Help, which is actually an online feature. It's if you're not connected, you're not going to see this. You're still going to, for the moment anyway, get the internal help content that you've been used to seeing. But what this is really good at is, number one, it gives you options. In fact, let me go back in here and I'll show you. Okay, well, for example, we go to banking, we want to write a check, and we're like, oh, wait, I don't quite know. I click F1, and it's going to come up with some pretty default content. But what it allows me to do is to say, okay, let's see, I want to write check. Yeah, that's what I want to do for credit memo, right? And so we've got a list of articles. Some of it's community content, some of it's internal content that we've published. And I read through my KB article and nope, it doesn't do what I want. So I can click back and you'll notice we have a contact us. So, let's say I could find no content, I could say contact us. We have options. You can post a question in the community. You can start a messaging, kind of like a chat. And you can ask for a callback. And so the beauty here is, pretty much any way that somebody would want to have contact, they can, right? You can ask other folks. You can have messaging if you prefer not to be on the phone, and you can get a callback. Callback is kind of simple. You just put in a phone number, first name, last name, email address, and then confirm the call. And within, looks like about 5 minutes at this point, you'd get a call back. And the beauty of that is too, the agent would already know a little bit about what you're going to ask about, right? Because you had already said you want to write a check for credit memo. So you get to the right agent, you get the right kind of content or intent. So hopefully really get you the information that you need if you didn't find it in KB content.
In the handout, there's 2 dates here. What's new in QuickBooks Desktop, and that's going to be a CPE credit. So if you go to the QuickBooks University Training and Certification, if you go to QuickBooks.com, look for training and certification, the webinars, you'll see that. The handout also will have a link directly to where you can find these webinars at. So I just wanted to highlight that. I know we're over time. Appreciate everybody hanging out as long as you did. 2/3 of the audience is still hanging in there. So thanks for hanging in there, troopers. So I am going to just simply fly through the rest of the slides because here's the handout that page was in. So get the handout, write down that link, go for it. Send us an email at intuit.com. In the know is one word. If you have any other issues, because we're going to be closing this webinar out here in a moment. So I'm going to actually just close on this slide so you can make sure you get the handout where all the other stuff, there's about 6 or 7 more, well, actually 10 more slides that I'm not going to get to. It's all the housekeeping stuff. So thanks for attending today, and you have a wonderful rest of your day.